Welcome back to Watch Talk, and today's video we'll be going over the history of one of my favorite watch companies out there. Call me vanilla, but I love Rolex. So we're going to be going all the way from 1905 till 2020, which we are now, and see what the journey this company has taken. Jumping right into it, in 1905, Hans Wilsdorf and Alfred Davis met for the first time. And when they met, they decided to create a watch company, and they did not name it until 1908. So 1908, Hans Wilsdorf created the name Rolex. He created the name, from my understanding, because it sounds very luxury. Just think about it, Rolex. You can say it in almost any language, and it always sounds the same. So it was just a very, very smart name to market, you know? And from then, in 1910, they also started putting their watches through chronometer certified. So that means it's either plus or minus 2 seconds a day, which is very, very accurate for a watch that is mechanical. On lower end pieces, they're more like 45 plus and 30 minus. So Rolex is a very accurate movement. That's what I'm trying to say. So then in 1926, they created the first Oyster case. Now, it is the Oyster, meaning that is waterproof. You can swim with the case on. They did this great marketing ploy where the first woman to swim across the English Channel wore a Rolex. They were very smart in their marketing, and you'll find that through the history. So in 1931, they patent the world's first perpetual caliber. In 1945, they came up with the Rolex Datejust. Now, the Datejust was one of the coolest watches. It's their entry level. You can get a Datejust for not as much as the sports models, and it was revolutionary. It had the date window and the Cyclops, as we all recognize Rolex today, and it instantaneously changed at 12 o'clock. No other watch changes automatic date change, which is very revolutionary for the time. Very, very cool. And the style hasn't changed. Jumping into the 50s, it was huge for Rolex. They came out in 1953 with the Rolex Submariner, probably the most homaged and copied watch in the world. You see this watch, let's see, Invicta, I can name them all, but very, very huge copied watch, and it's just revolutionary. So we have to go back. Let's go back to 1953. This design was new. This was brand new. And I'll tell you in another video the story between Tudor and Rolex, because Tudor is under the Rolex name, and they came up really with the first Submariner style. But I'll talk about that in another video. Let's go back to this because I get sidetracked a lot. Now, 1953, the same year, they came out with the GMT Master. This was a huge watch. The GMT Master was fantastic in a way because the airline Pan Am asked Rolex, they want their pilots to know what time they're taking off in their starting location, and they also want their pilots to know when they're landing. So that extra hour hand can give you 2 time tracks. So it can give you when you're taking off and when you're landing. And for everyday use, you can know when a relative is in another state or anything. You can tell 2 time zones with the GMT Master. Very, very cool that they came up with that. 1 year later, in 1956, Rolex came up with the Milgauss. Now, the Milgauss was the first true anti-magnetic watch. You can have it up to 1,000 watts. It will not go out. So for the people that don't know, I'll explain quickly. What I'm talking about is when a watch is automatic and it's magnetized. It runs faster than it normally would. So this watch is the first one to have it non-magnetized. So when you have a phone and it's buzzing in your pocket, that's transmitting magnetic fields. So that's what that did. Now, 1963, they came out with the Rolex Daytona. So the story real quick with this is the Daytona was supposed to be, they were trying to make it to the moon, but the Omega Speedmaster beat them. So it was the Cosmograph. Now that's the Rolex Daytona that came out then. Then it was in a cycle of, they didn't know really what it was, but that's a different video altogether. So 1963, the Daytona. Jumping to 1967, then they came out with the Sea Dweller, up to 1,000 meters of depth. Very, very cool. The true dive watcher Rolex. The sub is very cool, 300 meters. The Sea Dweller, 1,000. You can go very, very deep. You can do professional scuba dives. And speaking about professional, these watches back in the 60s, 50s, even 70s, and a bit into the 80s, these watches were not considered expensive watches. Rolex, they were workhorse movements. If you look at a Rolex movement, it's workhorse. And they were meant for people, say GMT Masters are meant for pilots. And the sub can just be in everyday use, a tool watch. They were not meant, carpenters had Rolexes back then. So it's very, very interesting to see where the brand has changed into luxury before you being a everyday man, working man's watch. Very, very cool. Very interesting with their history. 1985 was a huge change for Rolex. Then they came out with the 904L stainless steel. It's a hot debate. You're giving up the strongness of 316L stainless steel, but you're also getting the anti-corrosion with the 904, and it's very easy to polish out. So give and take, but it's very cool that they have their own stainless steel. It's fantastic. Now, later on, coming all the way to the 2000s, they started producing their own gold mixtures. They're going more in-house in 2000s. They were going, their Everrose gold is a mix of all the, I think a bit of platinum in there. So a lot of new ideas coming out of Rolex, all in-house. It's more enclosed, Rolex started becoming. And then they waited a bit, and in 2005, they came up with their Cerachrome. So that's on their GMT Masters and their Yacht Masters, and that's the bezel. It won't come to, the sun won't bleed through like you see on the patina dials of the old GMT Masters. These new ones that are coming out, they're very, very hard. They won't scratch the bezels, and very cool that they have that. So going over all the history, where are they today at 2020? They're very much a luxury brand. Do I like how they've turned more towards luxury? Look, it's inevitable. The quartz, that's what did them in. I think when the quartz crisis hit, they had to go towards luxury or they wouldn't survive. Because let's be honest, these watches, they're entry level for Datejust, $3,000-$4,000 on the pre-owned market, right? Maybe a little more now. You can go get a quartz watch that is more accurate than this, sometimes up to a second a year if you're going with a Grand Seiko. So you can go get that watch and it will be way more accurate than a Rolex. That's why they had to go towards more luxury, in my opinion. I don't mind it because if you save enough, you can afford a Rolex. That's what I find. If you really like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did.